questions later on and the slides as well. So let's look at how we were going to find the answers, right? Okay. So what I do is, for this session, I've used demo data, so you may not see some very may not see some breakthroughs in the data, or some groundbreaking insights. But essentially, what you would find is, with the same visualizations that we work with every day, how can you get more out of it, more bang for your buck, right? So let's start with the 5 point check. Now, this is a question that we generally ask every analyst in our team before they start any analysis is, do you know where you need to go? And this becomes, now we're moving from more question based to more, how do we get this done, right? The more tactical part of our job. So do you know where the data lies, right? So is it report suite? Do you know the date ranges that you need to work with, right? Because that's important. And all of this will feed into your scope. So are you going to look at the last 90 days? Or are you going to look at different data points? The next part is you're going to look at the metrics. Now, metrics, like we talked just now, from your goals, your questions, it comes down to your KPIs. So if you know what your KPIs are, then you will start to build out your metrics and start to use those metrics that mean most relevant to your campaign. On the fourth element is your dimensions. Your dimensions are not just like, oh, pages report. You need to know, okay, what are my campaign pages? Do I have them ready? Don't start any analysis without knowing all of these 5 points, right? So do I have my campaign pages ready? Do I know which country they belong to? Are they only part of one country campaign? Am I looking at the correct product categories or content categories that I'm working with? And then finally, what additional segmentation that I need on this particular report or analysis, right? So you may need to exclude certain data sets or add certain data sets, or add some kind of pathing that is required in the segment. So all of this you would need to have in advance before you start your analysis, because that itself helps you put together your scope and your dates. And it also helps you narrow down, because when you start this out, you don't know where to start. So when you put this 5 point check in place, you already feel less overwhelmed with what you need to do. Okay. And for those of us who are starting this out for the first time, this is a quick check that helps you go from being very overwhelmed to being confident about what you're doing with your analysis. So I would say start here, and I always ask my team this, and ask them to even get it from the teams that have this information before they commit to delivery time, right? So that is also important, because without having all these elements in place and providing delivery dates, it doesn't make sense. Sometimes you may not even need to start the analysis till the campaign is completed, right? Because if you're doing a post factor uh, analysis, per factor analysis, then you would actually need to wait a little while. So there are different aspects to consider when you do this 5 point check, and it gets you started, or gets you thinking at least. Okay, so with that said, let's look at the good old trend line, right? Now, everyone must be rolling their eyes and like, okay, we didn't come here for this, but let me tell you about this humble, good old trend line, okay? Now, why I say this and why do we start here? With a trend line, you need to do this if you're doing any analysis, is drop your visits and look at the data in the date range where your campaign is affected, or your content is relevant to be analyzed. Okay, so Take the equal amount of time before the campaign, after campaign sometimes you may not have, but before the campaign, take a date range that is sufficient on both ends, and your campaign is right in the middle, or your brand refresh is right in the middle, and then start looking at the data. Okay, especially with brand refreshes, it's important to know when it happened and take the equal amount of date range before and after the brand refresh. Okay, so why I'm asking you to use the visit report, sorry. So visit report helps you to understand, is there an overall trend, okay, that can impact my campaign. Okay, there are certain seasonalities that happen, um, whether it's a holiday seasonality or it's like financial tax seasons. Those seasonalities overall impact a campaign performance, and it's important to have that high level context before we get started, and to add those caveats when we are reporting out the data. So sometimes campaigns perform poorly because the overall traffic to the site itself is down because of external factors, right? So yes, you should not have run the campaign sometimes in those particular seasonalities if it's going to impact, but sometimes some things happen, right? So it's important to understand an overall traffic trend before getting started, and then see how that impacts your campaign and content. Okay. The next thing is, with what you can do within Adobe Analytics. Now, let's take a deep dive into that. Now, I have highlighted a few areas on this trend line that I would essentially go back and read about. The one highlight is the peak point where you see about 33K, I think 33K, yeah, 33K visits. So within the trend line itself, you can show minimums and maximum. Okay, this is a quick way of seeing where you've seen the most traffic or most footfall to your site and or to your campaign, right? And then use that as a point where you want to analyze further. Go into that week where that traffic was highest and see what was performing the best during that time, what performed the worst. So you start with the trend line and then you break this down. It's all about starting. So you do the minimum and maximums and see where you had the lowest points as well, right? What could have caused that? Was all of this traffic a result of a campaign, or is my organic share of traffic also increasing? And then you want to break down those low periods and see where actually pages are not seeing a lot of traffic, right? uh, the other reason I've put this line right in the middle of the chart is, from a visualization perspective, like I said, you want to annotate as much as you can. You want to make sure that uh, you're adding more insights which are closer to the visual, and it's easy to associate when you are presenting or when you're sharing this slide out or presentation out with others, right? So do your minimums, maximums, okay, and then look at the anomalies. Now there is anomaly detection within the tool itself, and if you look at this visual or this trend line, you'll notice that there is a shaded area of blue, and then there is a dotted line over there, and then you've got your solid line which is going in there, and then I've added a gray line over there. Now there's a lot happening. I wouldn't do all of this, but just for today's purpose of the demo, I've added all of it. Now let's talk about each of these different elements. Okay, the shaded area is basically your upper and lower values or expected values between those bounds. Okay, so your campaign or this particular set of data in the past has also seen, or could have also possibly had a maximum of certain bound, right, or value. So that is what it's showing over here, the shaded area. The next one is the dotted line. The dotted line is kind of how your traffic would have been expected, right? So what kind of values you could have expected. And the anomalies, or those white circles with an outline of blue, those are your anomalies, right? That's a very interesting one. It's basically what has happened. It has performed above or below your expected value. So if you see that dot over there to your left hand side, which I've highlighted with the hover, that one has performed above. Okay, so it has performed above the expected upper bound. And if you come all the way to your right, you'll see the lower one, which has expected below the expected bound. Okay, it performed below the expected bound. So these anomalies can be further analyzed using the analyze option, which I've highlighted, which is called analyze. And then when you hit analyze, it loads the contribution analysis. Now, contribution analysis is an interesting area. There's a lot you can do over there, and you can uncover different ways of what aspects and factors impacted that anomaly. Now, I would not take everything that shows up over there at face value and like, hey, yeah, this is the reason. You would want to take those different, like there's an interesting segment called when you load the contribution analysis, you will see the contribution segments. Um, so when you do the contribution segments, you'll see different kinds of dimensions and metrics juxtaposed together to show you how this could have impacted your data during that anomaly. Okay, I would suggest recreating that, seeing what trends you're seeing from there, and taking it further. Okay, so the idea is to use these additional machine learning options which are there, that are built out with Adobe Sensei, that you can use and further improve your analysis. Okay, some of the use cases that have been there in the past are about seeing product demands, of seeing how certain migrations of content have impacted, seeing what certain pages or certain channels are adding more value or bringing in more buys or sales to your particular products, right? So these are different ways that you can use the trend line. And like you see, we are been on this slide for so long, and there's so much potential that you can do with just a simple trend line. So I would suggest go back to basics, start with the trend line, and then take it from there and keep building on that. So that's with the trend line. Now, the next one we're going to look at is, and this is one of my favorite analysis when I do campaign performance analysis, is the marketing channel. That's pretty obvious. But what I'm going to say is that go down that rabbit hole. Okay, don't just put, oh, marketing channel report and this is what it is and done. No, that's not the that's not how I would suggest going through it. Go through every single channel in your whole channel strategy. You can definitely look at each channel and come back with insights for further marketing efforts, right? So whether you have a high direct, especially with campaigns, you want to see if you're having high direct traffic, you could have probably not added a tracking code. So when you see a high share of direct traffic, the idea is to analyze that further, see if it go back to your activation team and ask them for the dates where your campaign went live, and see if the spikes in your direct traffic are aligning with those dates. Then probably you have missed a tracking code. Okay, the other one, and these channels that you're seeing on the screen are from the Adobe demo data, but you could have set up your processing rules, marketing channel processing rules differently, and have labeled them differently. So, say for example, you're looking at your social campaigns, right? So, your social campaigns, like what we do with one of our implementation is, we have set up tracking codes separately for organic and paid campaign. Right, so essentially we both look at both our paid traffic and our organic traffic separately, and then what we're doing is we're looking at the marketing channel detail report, and we're looking at the campaign tracking code report, and we are breaking down each of those campaign tracking codes further, and seeing which among them, and if you've added a lot of metadata in your campaign tracking code, which is kind of like a best practice, you will notice that you can get additional information on which placement worked the best. Or like in a paid search campaign, you would add what kind of matches they are, like if they're exact match keywords or broad match keywords, what gave you the best results. So not because I would say don't just do a breakdown. If you're doing an email campaign, don't just do email. See how the other channels are performing as well. Now, when it comes to brand refresh, you would want to see for sure your session refresh. You'd want to see your natural traffic. Has that recovered after your brand refresh? If you have migrated content, is the SEO traffic or natural or organic traffic, whatever we call it within the organizations, like has that recovered? So each of these channels have different values and they bring different value to your channel, your channel strategy and reporting. So I could just do a whole marketing channel strategy based on this one marketing channel report. So I would say once you finish the visit, then go to the marketing channel, and then what I do is something that I call the reality check. This is kind of a fallout report, and we kind of do this in two ways. One is when we are running um, a paid search sorry, a campaign, versus when we do a site performance, and we have certain top actions that we want the visitors to take. One, it could be like your lead submissions. You add that particular path and you look at it. Other one is when you have your campaign. Now, in most scenarios, we always want and hope for the ideal linear, simple visitor journey. They would have taken, gone to the campaign landing page, hit a couple of product views, and then they bought it, right? And they added to the cart, and then they bought the product. So you want to look at what is that conversion looking like today. So a fallout report helps you see my ideal journey, how much of that is actually happening. And that's why I call it the reality check. You want to know what you think is the right path, and is your visitor actually taking that path, right? Now we could do this two ways, and you'll see different results. Sometimes they're not very different, but one is to use the eventual path which I've highlighted versus the next hit path. So eventual path eventually is saying that eventually they went to the product view, whereas if I say from the home page they went directly, the next hit was a product view page. Uh, the results, or the the conversion rates, as I call it, like what, how they taking that path, is that successful, you will see different results. Okay, so if you want to have a more strict uh, path, then you would use the next hit. And then if you want to say like, okay, they got there but they got there eventually, then you would use the eventual path option there. Now, it's important to understand that these reports, when you pull them, you also need to see that from your homepage, can I actually go to a product view page? And I know I forgot to say this, but when you're working with the campaign performance, especially, I would start with first going through that visitor journey myself and seeing where in that whole page is the next step that the intended next step that I had set up for them, right? So how much of the success of that next page is happening depends on how I set up that experience itself, right? So that itself becomes a huge insight. Like let me give you an example of a landing page where I say that I want more content consumption for this leader's thought leadership, or this writer's thought leadership, right? So where do I put that download, or where do I put that read now button? Where in that whole page does it like also defines the success, if I'm defining success by the consumption rate of that report. So all of these, it will help you if you actually go through that experience yourself as a marketing analyst, and then come out and then start your analysis. Another aspect that I would suggest is, especially when adding metrics or events to a particular report for analysis in any level, whether it's in the trend level or if it's even in your fallout report, you want to know whether it's tagged first before you add it, right? So it's many times we use components that are not tagged. They have not inherited analytics from the component that was added into a new template. I mean, if you're working with the CMS like AEM, a lot of that is inherited, but sometimes they break, the analytics breaks, and then you are actually having a campaign that is not tagged with a button a campaign page that's not tagged with a button that is tagged. So you can have these problems, and then you should not end up reporting on and saying that you didn't have any engagement at all. You want to say that, hey, let me see how they went onto the page. Did they go to the bottom of the page? Maybe they read the whole content, they didn't need to download it. So when you have such gaps in your tagging itself, you need to look out for some proxy metrics. I know I digressed for a quick second over there, but it just came up and I wanted to share that with you. Always go to your page, experience it as the target audience, and then also check the tagging on the page if it was set up in the ideal way that it was supposed to set up. And then you go into your reporting and then look for your 5 point check and start that journey. Okay, so coming back to the reality check fallout report, you want to look at this, and then it also, like, say you're doing an evergreen campaign, you want to come back next year and provide insights before they start the campaign as to what they can do from a user experience. This is a good report. You say that, hey, you are building out this experience, but only 40% of your traffic is doing this. Is this ideal for you? Is this what you want? Right? So you want to have that information with you and set up the report, and then look at what is actually happening. Now, there is another report, and this is called Go with the Flow. So, essentially, you're keeping the journey more open. And what you're doing is you're creating a journey for them, uh, starting with an anchor point. You're not doing anything differently. You're just adding your campaign landing page and saying, tell me, where did they come from? Where did they go to? Okay. Now, you can do this because it helps understand where are the other potential points that you can reach out to your audience. Say you can cross promote, right? Say many times a lot of the visits start on the homepage. So, can I do a homepage promo that will bring them to my campaign landing page? So, basically, you're not just promoting your campaign from external to internal, but internally on the site itself, you are promoting your content or your campaign. So, a report like this helps you to understand not what you think is the ideal path, but what the actual path of your repeat visitors or your regular visitors to your site are taking. And how do you take advantage of that? So, say for example, the campaign is done and you're reporting now, right? So what you would use is essentially you would use the fallout report to show the actual numbers of what actually happened. And then in your recommendation section you can say, hey, when we do this campaign next time or in 3 months from now, I want to show you what actually happened, like where did most of our visitors come from and where did they go to. So a flow report becomes kind of like part of your recommendation section or your next step section. Okay, I'm just gonna do a quick time check. We have about 50 minutes, and I have one more slide. And if either of any of the attendees have any questions, do put them in the chat, or we can talk live as well. But I'm just gonna go to my last report, and this is my favorite report, which has helped me when I had you talk about writer's block, right? uh, but when you are an analyst also, when everything is going well or everything is going not so well, what happens is you have to still figure out what's that story I want to tell, right? What's that angle I have not analyzed yet? What is that one thing that I can give them to think about new, right? Sometimes we are doing evergreen campaigns, it's the same thing, it's the same marketing channels, the activation team is doing almost the same. How do I find new angles or potential areas which are not tapped? And that's what brings me to my scatter plot. Okay, you may say scatter plot, but essentially a scatter plot is kind of building together relationships and showing you relationships between two different metrics. Now there's a depending on which tool you work with, some of us do analysis in BI tools like Tableau. The limitations on how many metrics and dimensions you can use to analyze the data are different. For now, you can take a look at what options are there within the scatter plot for Adobe Analytics, but I mostly start with about two dimensions and two metrics. In this case, to keep it simple, I've used one dimension and I've used two metrics. One is the visit metrics and one is the product views metric. Now let's take a look at what it says. Okay, so, sorry, I've used a channel dimension and I've used product views and visits. My visit label is not showing up, but on my x axis, I have my visits. Now, essentially, what this report is doing is it's creating relationship between two different metrics and telling you that even like in this particular scenario, it is creating kind of outliers. It's showing you who are those outperformers or even low performers. Okay, so when we use a scatter plot, it's important to understand that um, what metrics you're going to be using. There has to be some sense, some correlation between these two metrics, right? Otherwise, you may not find anything very helpful. Okay, so my idea is usually to start simple, start with one of the one metric that is kind of like a traffic metric, and then I add a conversion metric on the other axis. So am I bringing enough people, and are they taking enough, are they doing enough, or are they doing the actions that I intended them for to do? So usually visits is always there to start out with, and then I add actions or conversions that I want to track. So in this case, the scatter plot is, what do we have here? So the scatter plot is the dark blue, and it is on the extreme end at the bottom. So what it says here is I have so many views that visits that come from the direct channel, but there's hardly any product views. So my direct channel is bringing in a lot of traffic, but I'm not seeing them going to my product views, which I consider one of my KPIs, where I want more content consumption or product view consumption or looking at more products, so it eventually leads to a buy. So I've put them both on a y and x axis, and I'm saying that okay, my direct channel is not doing well. Now, do I care about it? That's a different question. What can I do with that particular observation, right? So from there, I can understand that direct channels, and direct is another tricky channel, right? Because you can you see a lot of data, like you'll see a lot of data for direct. It could be campaigns that are not tracked with campaign tracking codes. It could be that it's bookmarked, or it could also positively mean that someone is typing in directly the URL into the browser, right? So a direct channel could be any of these reasons. And if I have to take it in the positive sense, or the where there's to see an advantage or a potential, is that those repeat visitors who know my URL, who have bookmarked me, um, I'm not getting them to view more products. So what do I do? Right? And that helps me understand where do I take this information? What do I do from there? The same way, I have a social campaign which is in purple, or I think that's other campaigns. But let's pretend, because this is demo data after all, let's pretend that was my social channels. I'm seeing a lot of product views among, I mean, the highest product views coming in from my social campaign, but the visits are pretty sorry, the visits can also, there's potential to add more visits coming in from the social, so that converts better. So when you look at these scatter plots, it builds this relationship and helps you understand what can I do more, where do I take it from here, are there new relationships and new actions that are happening that I've not seen. So you can do this with your pages report or page or your product categories. Look at which categories are seeing a lot of visits, a lot of traffic, but they're not converting to all of those actions that I want to. Now that's what we can do with the scatter plot. I have shared a lot of information, I acknowledge that. But essentially, when we look at this analysis, the idea is to keep asking those questions, sharing those questions with, and breaking down those questions, and looking at the questions from a objective perspective, and building out what are my KPIs and how do I find those answers. So today we have looked at Adobe Analytics and what kind of answers you can find to those questions. And we're going to do further sessions on how to improve this, how to improve your analysis within the tool and build out stronger user stories. oh, sorry, data stories. So I will leave you with this one thought if there are no questions in the chat, and I'm going to stop talking. But essentially, this is something that my manager told me is data helps you tell the story, but it is not the story, right? And that is why I focus more of the time on what are your questions, what are your goals. Ask these, you need to know this before you get started and go into the data, because I can put a visit and put a set of metrics together and pull out a story anytime. But you should know what are the questions you're trying to ask and get answered, and what are those KPIs that you need to look at. So I'll pause here. If there are any questions, I know we have a small group, but if there are any questions, we can take them. I have a few minutes. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to my initial slide. If you'd like to stay in touch, or if you'd want to get involved, I would say this is a new user group. We are looking for more individuals to come join us. So, Jyoti, Parth, Iona, thank you all for joining. Um, let me know how you want to stay connected, or you can hit us up on LinkedIn and we can talk further. But thank you for joining and staying till the end.